3 golden eagles for War Thunder. Link in the description. So, you want to enter the awesomeness that is the realistic tank battles. Maybe you came from the arcade mode and can't seem to do well in RB? Or maybe you just want to know what all the fuss is about. Well, you've come to the right place. Realistic tank mode is the place where the noobs get feasted on by the pros. But with these 10 tips, you're sure to have success. Number 1. Be aware. The biggest difference between arcade and realistic mode is the lack of identification above enemy tanks. It is very important that you spot the enemy before they spot you. The easiest way to spot an enemy is to use the binoculars. These will give you the point of view of your commander as if he was looking around from the top of the cupola and is the single most useful tool at your disposal. The binoculars increase the zoom, make your view clearer, and allow you to look around the entirety of the tank without moving the turret, and give you a higher viewpoint, allowing you to look over obstacles that you couldn't otherwise look over in your gunner view, whilst keeping your tank completely covered. When you spot an enemy, you can also left click while still in bino view to point your gun towards the target. You can also use the binos to shoot enemies whilst behind a bush you could normally not see them from. Simply point the gun with the binos, adjust for the range, and quickly fire whilst you go back to the gunner view. To use the binos, simply go to the controls, view controls, and bind them to a key you can easily access whilst having full control of your tank's movement. Number 2. Don't be spotted. Realistic mode is a lot like a giant game of hide and seek. Whoever hits the first shot usually wins the engagement, so it is very important that you aren't the one who gets shot at first. In order to minimize the chances of you being spotted, you can use terrain features like hills, valleys, bushes, rocks, houses, trees, dead tanks, living tanks, and so on to completely or at least partially cover your tank. You can also use appropriate camouflages and decorations to make it harder for the enemy to spot you. For example, if you're playing on a snowy map, you want to make sure that your tank isn't bright red. On forested maps, you can use tree lines and bush decorations to hide the outlines of your tank. And on desert maps you can use tan camouflages and dunes to cover your approach. In general, you should always avoid wide open areas and put in the extra time to go around and move from cover to cover, taking a moment to stop from time to time and scout out the area with your binoculars. Just imagine that you are fighting against dinosaurs with movement-based eyesight. When you are scouting the area or setting up in an ambush position, you want to make sure to stand as still as possible, moving neither the hull nor the gun. A tank is extremely hard to spot and cover as long as it stays completely still, and as such you should make it a habit to use the C key to look around the tank without moving the turret and using the binos for much of the same effect. Number 3. Learn the map. There are currently 20 different maps available for tanks, and each one requires different tactics and lanes. The two most important things you need to learn about each map is where the enemy is most likely to come through in order to get to the objectives, and where you can position yourself to get the best shots at those lanes whilst having solid cover to retreat to. War Thunder does give you a couple of tools so that you don't have to find those things out the hard way in real battles. First, you can set up custom battles against bots where you can freely explore the map and get a general idea of the most used roads to each objective. You can also use the replay system in real battles to get a bird's eye view of the map and analyze where most of the players go to, as well as try to find places you can reach to cover those approaches. A little bit of studying can get you a long way when it comes to facing off against real players. Number 4. Know your tank. There are a number of different vehicle types in the game, currently consisting of light tanks, medium tanks, heavy tanks, tank destroyers, anti-air vehicles, and any number of hybrids in between. And even within each category, one tank might require a completely different playstyle to another tank. As a rule of thumb, each tank's best role is determined by 3 characteristics: armor, mobility, and firepower. Depending on the combination of these characteristics, you can have brawling tanks, harassers, glass cannons, doom cannons, fortresses, and utter pieces of crap. Let me give you a quick guideline on each role. Brawling tanks generally fall under the medium tank designation and provide a good balance between mobility, armor, and firepower. These tanks tend to excel at city combat, where they can use their mobility to flank around enemy heavy tanks and tank destroyers, use their rather fast-firing gun to quickly dispatch of one or more enemies, and still bounce on returning fire thanks to their armor. Some examples of this are the Soviet T-34 and T-44, which are infamous for being all-around very versatile tanks. Harassers mostly fall in the light tank and American tank destroyer line. These vehicles sacrifice armor and firepower for maximum mobility, giving them the ability to quickly travel across the map and get all up into the flanks of the enemy. Their guns tend to be of a small caliber, but compensate for that with a good accuracy and a fast fire rate. Examples of this are the M18 Hellcat and the Leopard. These tanks don't tend to get many one-shot kills, but their ability to pop up in unexpected places allows them to disable entire lines by working off the turret rings, cannon breaches and drivetrains of enemy tanks, allowing your team to finish them off easily and advance the front line. Glass cannons mostly fall in the tank destroyer line and sacrifice armor and mobility for deadly guns. Examples of this are the Dicker Max, the Nashorn and the SU-100Y. These tanks are best used in a supporting role, staying behind friendlies at a distance, picking off enemy heavy tanks that your team can't otherwise dispatch easily. These vehicles can be very important for your team's success, but are also very easily destroyed. It is important to stay hidden and make sure the enemy doesn't know where you are, before it is too late. Doom cannons mostly fall onto the heavy tank lines. These tanks have big guns and lots of armor, making them very dangerous opponents when guarding choke points. The biggest examples of Doom cannons are the Soviet KV-2 and the German Jagdtiger. Their big caliber guns tend to one-shot whatever they hit, and their armor allows them to deflect a lot of shots coming from the front. However, they suffer from extremely long reload times, which makes them very vulnerable whilst they are reloading. They also suffer from extremely poor mobility and are easily flanked. In one-on-one fights, these tanks tend to be very powerful, but against multiple opponents they are easily overwhelmed. Finally, we got the fortresses, which tend to fall in the heavy tank and German armored tank destroyer line. These vehicles have very good armor and medium caliber guns with a good fire rate. Examples of this would be the Tiger and Jagdpanzers, which are best used in a defensive role, holding choke points and objectives. Their massive armor allows them to stay in position for a long time, completely stopping the enemy advance. Their guns have a good balance of penetration and damage, allowing them to deal with multiple enemies at once. But, as with the Doom cannons, these tanks tend to suffer from poor mobility and are slow to respond if flanked. Number 5. Spot the enemy for your team. Even though you don't get name tags for enemies in RB mode, you can ping them for your entire team to know their location. There are two ways of doing this. In case you saw someone flank by but couldn't get a shot at them before they went into cover, you can open up the map and click on the general area you think he is at. This will call out a map square as well as put a flashing symbol on your teammates' maps, so that they get an idea of the general direction where you saw the enemy at. Make sure you pay attention to map callouts from your friendlies as well, as it can save you from being flanked. The second and more accurate way is to simply hit the enemy, either with your main gun or your machine gun. Every time you do this, a red triangle will appear in the general proximity of the enemy tank, which is visible on screen for your entire team. This way you can also ask your team to help you, in case your main gun is unable to fire and there's an enemy looking right at you. Do keep in mind that MGs fire tracer rounds, however, which can give away your position if you are hidden. Number 6. Learn to aim! No, really. As opposed to arcade mode, in realistic battles you don't got any sort of a target marker that indicates how much you have to aim above a target to compensate for bullet drop. Therefore, it is essential that you learn how to use your gun sight in order to reliably hit your target, instead of just firing random shots hoping that one of them hits. The first step of this is using the rangefinder. Every tank in the game gets a rangefinder, and to use it you simply have to bind it to a key in your controls, tank controls, right at the bottom of the list. This tool allows you to more or less accurately get the distance between you and whatever you're aiming at, up to a distance of 1 kilometer away. Once you've got the range, simply align your gun. Each of the horizontal lines represents a distance of 200 meters, and adjust automatically to the ammo type you're using. So, if for example you're aiming at a target 600 meters away, simply aim with the third line down on your gun sight and you'll hit every time. After some time in RB, you should be able to more or less judge the distances by yourself, and you'll rely less on the rangefinder. But while starting out, this, along with the binoculars, are the most important tools you have available to you. Number 7. Learn the weak spots, crew and module locations. Unlike other tank games, you can't destroy a tank by simply shooting the same spot over and over and over again until it runs out of hit points. In War Thunder, you either need to kill the entire crew or blow up an ammo rack or fuel tank in order to do the job. Therefore, it is important that you know the anatomy of whatever you're shooting at. As a rule of thumb, your first shot should always go for the enemy's gunner, as that will prevent him from shooting back at you, possibly creeping you or killing you before you have a chance to finish him off. As a rule of thumb, the gunner on most tanks sits on the right of the gun, from your point of view. Exceptions are most of the American tanks and some of the British ones. When in doubt, study the X-ray of the tanks you struggle most against in the hangar. You can do this by previewing them, by the way. Same thing goes for armor, so that you can figure out where best to shoot at in order to maximize your chances of penetration. But all that armor and X-ray studying in the world won't help you if you don't do number 8. Use the right ammo. You have lots of different ammo choices on each of your tanks, and it can get very confusing very fast for the newcomer. I used to commit the error of thinking that a shell with more penetration must be better, but it is not the truth in most cases. I won't go too in depth with this just here, as I have a dedicated guide planned on the subject, but here's the general guideline. Solid shots feature no explosive filler. These shells tend to have more penetration against flat surfaces, but don't do well against angled armor. They also don't explode inside, meaning that you'll only damage what's in the direct flight path. APCR and Sabo shells also tend to have higher muzzle velocity, making it easier to hit long-range targets. But especially in the case of APCR, they lose a lot of penetration the farther they travel. APHE type shells sacrifice some pure penetration potential for damage. They carry an explosive filler and explode once inside, damaging crew and modules in a wider area. These shells tend to have better penetration values against angled armor than the solid AP cousins, but also have a higher chance to randomly bounce. Regardless, these are the overall most versatile shells, and should be your main choice in most engagements. Heat shells are different from other shell types in that they don't lose penetration potential no matter how far they travel. These shells send a supersonic stream of copper through the armor and act pretty much like a solid shot once inside. They manage angled armor much better than AP ammo, however, and have a higher chance of exploding ammo racks and fuel tanks. However, they can be completely eaten up by spaced armor and tracks, requiring you to be more accurate with your aim. These shells are most useful in early and top tiers, with their effectiveness around tier 3 being negligible. HE shells explode on impact and act like mini-bombs, creating a large sphere or shrapnel around the impact point. The potential of these shells depends entirely on their caliber, with anything below 100mm being completely useless against anything that has a bit of armor, and 122mm shells and up actually being able to damage or destroy enemy tanks when fired in a way that the shrapnel can throw through the top or bottom hull armor. In most tanks, you should only bring a couple of them to deal with anti-air vehicles, unless you want to derp the enemy in the face with your KV-2. Number 9. Support your team. Whilst playing the lone wolf can be a lot of fun, it won't win you games most of the time. It is always a good idea to stick near some friendlies, as that gives the enemy something else to shoot at. When playing heavily armored tanks, make sure to push the front lines and protect your less armored teammates. And when playing mobile harassers, make sure to flank the enemy and give covering fire, so that your team can advance. Make it a habit to save your teammates as well. If there's an enemy that's just disabled your teammate and is about to flank around to finish him off, make it your priority to kill him before he's able to do so. Remember, a crippled teammate is still more valuable than a dead one. And finally, number 10. This is a hidden little secret that I've kept to myself for a long time, and I haven't seen anyone else mention yet. Have you ever noticed that whenever you're transitioning from forwards to backwards movement, your tank stops for a split second? When fighting against enemies on a corner, this split second can be enough for the enemy to put a shot into your driver and finish you off from there. There is a way to essentially remove that time where you're just sitting still and go immediately into reverse. Just use the clutch. In order to use the clutch, you have to set it to a key first. Go to Controls, Tank Controls, click on Realistic Controls on the top and scroll down until you find Tank Transmission Gear Neutral. Once you set a key, you can set the top back to mouse aim and you're good to go. To use the clutch effectively, you need to let go of the gas, click the clutch and immediately go into reverse. Same thing works backwards. Simply let go of the reverse, click the clutch and immediately go forwards again. This is very useful when facing off against doom cannons around corners, as you can bait them into firing and either bouncing or missing, which gives you the opportunity to take them out or get the hell out of there whilst they are still reloading. And that is all that I can teach you for today. If you follow these tips, you're sure to become a pro tanker in no time. If you have other tips that I've left out and you want to share with your fellow tankers, post them into the comment section down below. Make sure to crush that like button and subscribe if you're new around here. My name has been MikeGoesBoom. Thanks for watching.
You can lift your head up to the sky, take a deeper breath and give it time. You can walk the path among the lines with your shattered frame of mind. Or instead you could always stay. We can wait right here and play until somehow you can find a slightly better frame.